I made a bit of a mistake to get caught on camera with a dirty laptop, and now everybody thinks that the camera that I've got is dirty, but I tried washing it off and that didn't fix the issue. It's just a laptop camera. It's never been particularly high quality. I may have originally, when I came to YouTube, had a different camera system, and now I'm, back down to this because the ones that I haven't been able to find them for a while. They've been packed up and, in boxes and everything to try to consolidate space. And that's the issue. I've tried cleaning it. It doesn't work. So, suck it up, viewer. Hopefully you can at least hear me. Um, I love turn-based combat. I've loved it for a long time. And I wanted to talk about Final Fantasy today and everything and Square, my own history, like personally, I've been around since like the original Final Fantasy. Like I've been playing since FF1. Now, mind you, I was born in '86. Game comes out in 89, 89. I get my hands on Final Fantasy right around 92. So about 3 years after launch, I'm playing the game. I didn't get it, back during 99. I mean, 89. I mean, I wasn't playing them because I was a bit too young to get into the system. But when I was about six, I finally got into Final Fantasy. I'd never actually beat the game, never actually got that far, but I did with four, I did with six. We didn't get five until many years later. And then when five came out, I was like, great job system and everything, but the lure here is very weak. Was my sentiment about five. I mean, it was just there's not really a strong story, a coherent storyline here. Um, I walked away from six though, like holy shit, this is the strongest. Like, if you were around back then, I mean, seven is a big game. It's a big, mature, rich storyline. But if you rewind the clock, six is really where things took off. I mean, five storyline is weak. Four's, I like it, but I could understand people being critical of it and having some things to say about it being a little bit cartoonish and not that deep. About four and its storyline and its lore, they would definitely say that about four. Now I like it. It definitely gets interesting in places, but it really just isn't that strong and or deep. Six hits and it's got this overwhelming spiritual message that resonates with just about everybody that picks up on it, where it's just like the world has gone to shit, everything's very dark, and you have to find a reason to keep going and to keep fighting, and its spiritual message ends up being about the power of friendships, connection, and human bonding, and the way that through each other we gain the strength to face these very dark times and circumstances and still find the will to carry on. And that ends up being an overarching theme that is woven through so many Final Fantasies. But it's like when six hit, it was like that is the major delineation point between when Final Fantasy, was almost a parody of itself and didn't really take itself too seriously when it came to the story it was trying to tell, to something that was really telling a very epic story, and really trying to have a very powerful lore that was almost like reading a book, a very powerful, a very good book, to like that was the point in which the series really took off as far as that's concerned. And when the stories got a little bit darker but a lot deeper, a lot more mature, And ever since, it's been like the real fandom, the ones that have been around for a while, the ones that know all of the Final Fantasies. Like, we're all going to be telling you that like 6 is the best, as far as its lore compared to pretty much all the others. 7 was great, you know. 8's everybody kind of made fun of, like, originally, because the the problem wasn't so much love and romance being a big part of it. It was just that it was at like the level of it being a theme behind everything that was happening with 8, like it being one of the main focuses of everything, from what they were saying, as far as what they were their their messaging about the series. um 8 Eight's is a bit wacky. It goes places that are just very strange. 9 was incredible and has one of the best soundtracks just anywhere. It was a return to medieval fantasy. It was very well done. And then 10 hits, and 10, I mean, I don't know how to feel about it. I do know that after 10, though, I kind of walked away from that experience, and then it was just like this kind of demonstrated for me. It was, as opposed to 8, it finally hit, though, that like Final Fantasy needed its romances, and it needed to be between heterosexual characters too. Like it had to be man woman, boy girl sort of romance. Like it needed something like that going on. And I think that after 10, it was kind of unforgivable to do 15, after everything that we experienced during 10, because it proved that the series was just absolutely dependent on its romance. And that's, I think, what fell apart with 15 for me, was the connection that it failed to make. 15, I hated its lore. I've always hated it. I've maintained a consistent hatred for it. I was completely disappointed by the lore behind it. I mean, I came into it with so much anticipation. I guess largely because I also came off the buzz and high of like Final Fantasy 14 being fixed, it having actually a pretty powerful lore that's behind it. Now, I hate its combat system. I play 11. I don't play 14, but I will say that I felt that of the lore behind 14, it was very well done. I remember feeling a very powerful and very potent sense of empathy and pity for Emmett Selk, watching some of the stuff behind the series, which, my general sentiments about 14 are just like, I don't play, but thank you to the community for posting the videos so that I can stay up to date on the lore behind it. I love that you guys do that. I love watching the lore. I've fallen in love with 14's lore and its storyline. And one of the observations that I could make about my love of this particular series, despite my hatred of its combat system, is just the way that they have finally mastered the art of having a villain that was well written. I would actually find myself critical of Kefka, critical of the Sephiroth, writing wise. Just of these guys and these villains, just because of the fact that they're not, well, I mean, both times both characters are completely insane. In 4, it was just Zemus is this big dark force and god, and big demon bad guy and monster that's completely inhuman, and its motivations full of hatred and just completely indecipherable and you can't understand it at all. You don't get it. And part of the problem with Kefka and Sephiroth is that they were so insane and crazy that it was just impossible to really understand what the hell it is that drove them to want to do the things that they were trying to do in the first place. Like, what you didn't really understand like why they were the way they were. You experienced what they were, but and how they acted, but you didn't really experience how they got the way that they were, and what motivated them to end up being the way they were. With Emmett Silk and everything, you those details are just completely painted in. You understand the Askians. You think they're wrong. You think they're misguided. You come away from it thinking, Jesus Christ, these guys are, they're doing wicked things, and they're wrong to be doing them, but I see why they're doing them, and I see what their motivations are, and I do feel sorry for them. You walk away from the whole experience feeling an immense sense of sympathy for the Askians, even though you do think they have to be stopped. You do think they're wrong. You still can't get past that sense of empathy for them after you finally realize what it is that's driving them. You end up with a sympathetic villain, and that's what's so great about 14. It's like one of its just overwhelming strengths is just that this shows a depth and maturity of storyline writing that were just completely unparalleled to any of the other villains that we've seen in the Final Fantasy series. Like, it's the first time that we've ever had something at that level and that strength. And I mean, I know that you guys want me to talk about passion and things that you're passionate about and care about. So here we go. I'm talking about it today. This stuff isn't, in the grander scheme of things, in a political world, in a world in which so much is going on, I definitely do think politics is more important than entertainment. But here we go. We're gonna get into entertainment. I love turn-based combat. I've been enjoying the hell out of Octopath Traveler 2 and Octopath. I love them. I love that system, and it really drives me crazy that so many people that were born here in the United States don't think that turn-based combat is challenging. I mean, I got rolled over, in those games. I got beaten by Captain Caldera like 0 out of 5 on her. And of North American gamers, if you don't think that turn-based combat is challenging, I mean, you should throw yourself into a turn-based system like Octopath Traveler 2. Now, it won't be hard for most of you until like chapter 4, and you get through most of the fight. You get through most of the game, and but once you get into some of the very end chapters and you're doing some of the end game fights, it's going to be brutal. You'll see the same shit that I went through. I mean, I've been playing for a while, which is why with Captain Caldera, I mean, I went so far as to, okay, she has darkness and thunder based attacks. Put on the thunderstorm, amulet. Put on the void amulet. Put them on 2 characters of yours in particular. Have them on both of these characters, your healer and one of your primary damage dealers. Put them on both of them, and then try beating the bitch. And it was like, that's not going to do it. Part of the problem was just that she has too many shields, and so it's difficult to actually break her. So you have to go and get the Arms Master with the 6-fold strike, to really get them broken and keep them broken and staggered for as much as possible of that fight. It was brutal though. Captain Caldera. Now the problem with Caldera is just that the first fight, the first phase is easy. Phase 2 though is brutal. And so Caldera of Night is a much harder boss, and it's just I guess what I wanted to say, about all this is just that turn-based combat, its biggest weakness is the lack of replay value once the mystery is solved. I mean, once you actually know how to do the fights, and once you have a general sense of strategy, that's it. Like, you're going to remember that shit for the rest of your life. You're going to know how to actually do that for the rest of your goddamn existence, and you're never going to ultimately forget it. It stays in that permanent memory. But, while you're while you're figuring it out, while you're trying to figure out how to beat these damn bosses, that's part of the fun with all of it. And so it's just like that. That's what you're going to be stuck with, and that's I get that's the biggest weakness that turn-based combat ultimately has. I mean, other than that, though, it can be absolutely enthralling and just completely addictive to fall in love with it. And once you've got your ass handed to you a couple of times, and you end up sticking with it and figuring it out, voila, you eventually fall in love with turn-based combat, and that's me. I've fallen in love with pixel art and turn-based combat. I have. So so another thing is just that I just got through today watching FF16 as far as its Let's Play, and there's a few things that I wanted to go over. I Okay, first of all, it was important that this Final Fantasy executed on deadline. And part of the problem is just that Square Enix has proven, you know, unfortunately, that when projects go over deadline and when you have one creative team sent in to try to do something and then that team is sent out and replaced with another, that the second team ends up decimating the game and destroying it. you know, because that's what happened with 15. I mean, you look into what 15 could have been versus what it ultimately ended up being and what its potential was, and it's just like they scrapped the original story and put in a new one, and the new one is just pathetic. I mean, if I were to complain about the lore of 15, it would just be Brotherhood is not a strong enough concept to be even an entry into the Final Fantasy mainline. It's weak. I I didn't just feel that the ending of the whole thing was too abrupt. I was like, one of my biggest disappointments was just the romance between Luna Freya and your main character is just not there. It's not included in the main storyline, the main game at all. And if you wanted to get more of that romance, you pretty much had to end up Googling around, to see multimedia experiences behind the whole thing. But you really didn't, the romance got scrapped, and it almost seems like there would have been a better one if they had just kept their original one with Stella at everything, but they ripped all of that out and put in this crappy one in its place, and it's just, that was probably one of my biggest disappointments with the system. It's just not very good, and it ended up not being that great. And a large chunk of the problem with 15 is the truncated and removed romance. The lack of a female character that travels with the party for most of the game just took a storyline that could have been good and drove it into the ground and completely ruined it. And so it's like, one of the things that I love about 16 is that it actually managed to execute within its development window. It actually set out to create a project and finish it within 3 years, and it actually did it within 3 years. It prevailed in doing that. So I watched it, though, and my overall, what you're getting here are impressions, because I literally just finished it today. Perhaps there will be more once I've really processed, my sentiments about this game, or perhaps somebody with a different perspective will come along and, change my own as far as influence. Overall, I love the spiritual message, which yet again seems to be about the enduring despite the tragic state of the world and the power of friendship and having allies at a will of your own. I will say a few things that are ultimately critical of the lore, though. One of Final Fantasy XIV's strengths is the Askians are so well thought out that by the end you end up with a sympathetic villain, which is actually a first in the franchise. Here in 16, though, Ultima's real purpose seems to be to evolve Clive enough that Clive becomes a vessel so he can possess and take over. and really give the game a big bad to kill. But a part of the problem with villains that are literally supernatural in total and literally lacking a mortal body is once you ultimately do that, you end up with villains that are completely unsympathetic, alien, and foreign to human understanding. So you end up incapable of feeling or anything beyond "fuck that guy, he has to die" for the villains. In 14, there's an acute sense that since the Askians are wrong, but certainly understandable, you feel a very powerful sense of empathy and pity for quite a few of them, like Emmett Selk. One of the things I like about humans being the ultimate bad is that you end up with largely human motivations and villains driven by motives that we can actually understand and see ourselves in and relate to. Here, however, Ultima seems to have largely set the playing ground merely to evolve Clive in order to possess him and take him over and purge the world of all of its humans. And whom decided to discard his more mortal form. Ultima being the big bad here is, I feel, a weakness in the lore. All that stated, kudos to Final Fantasy XVI for finally getting over the stigma against even having a romantic kiss in the storyline. It has a stronger lore overall than 15 and strong enough to be an entry into the series, into the franchise, unlike 15. The primary issue with 15 is just that it proved the point that the series needs its heterosexual romance. It just doesn't work without it being a big element of the plot anymore. The Sausage Fest Final Fantasy just does not work ultimately. The strength of the Brotherhood is just not a powerful enough storyline entry, the storyline wise for it to be an entry into the mainline. Development hell with 15 killed it. Scrapping the planned original romance drove the lore into the ground and ruined it. You know, another thing that I would like to point out, though, about 16 is kudos as well to Square Enix for finally getting over the wish fulfillment male protag. Clive is one of the most expressive male protags that we've ever received. Thank you for finally getting over the wish fulfillment. Male pronag and getting, a real one that actually has their own motivations rather than, ones that you as the viewer can project on and player are supposed to project onto them. We actually understand Clive.